So here we have the eBay cement mixer, 225 quid. This is the 550 watt version. So basically I thought I'd buy one because if you're doing any projects like this, you know what that means there, backache, pain in your backside really. So I thought I'd buy one of these, and I thought even if it works for a bit, then it'll be worth having. And so I thought, anyway, here we go, let's have a look around the parts and what to do. And the first thing I would say is that plug in that. So this is obviously the 550 watt mixer unit, motor unit. Plug it in, and I plugged this one in and it didn't work. And the reason it didn't work is that this just hums and sticks still, because these are ribbed belt driven and they are notoriously badly aligned, and the belt comes off, jams the motor, and there's a thermal cutout in here which often breaks. Having seen this before, because I've seen it on eBay for sale broken. Anyway, so the people who supplied this are going to send me a new motor, and so I'll end up two. This one I can probably repair, but obviously I'm not going to do it for nothing when they'll send me a new one and plug it in. We'll just have it as a spare. So do that first before you assemble all this, because if it doesn't work, you don't want to be taking it apart and sending it back, because it's a right pain. This weighs about 50 kilos turned up on a pallet. So I'm going to get set up, and then we'll start assembling it. Now, check all the parts first, is what I'm going to do. So we a little spin of this, I'll make sure you can see properly. Yeah, I can. Oh, did you hear that? The rough patch of teeth. Just there. There's 5 or 6 teeth that aren't cast properly. So yeah, I can see it just in there as a burr, quite a nasty burr. So I'm going to get a file and take that off. Other than that, the drum is pretty true. So we know we're good to go on the drum. So I'm going to mark that file there. So there's one problem already, other than the motor, of course. This is another example of why you want to check all these bits before you assemble it. Right, we're nearly there, and the idea is you wind this nut, this bolt down here, and pushes on the spring, which then puts tension on this. However, what I thought was just a stamping blank plate is this little 5p thing. Clearly it's supposed to go up inside there, so as you wind that down it pushes on the spring. I assumed that that was wide enough to push on the springs. It is, but obviously not, so you have to quickly whip it apart and do it again. Right, so we're pretty much there. It's all loosely assembled for the moment because I want to check all the geometry before we actually tighten it to make sure everything's straight, particularly when the motor goes on, because that motor box looks pretty flimsy, and if that's slightly out of alignment, it could quite easily cause the belt to fly off, which is already trash, as we know. But before we join these two halves together, we need to be an octopus, because somehow we need to get this rubber gasket, which isn't round, around this round hole, whilst at the same time sticking the top on and putting the bolts through. So right this second, stuck. Anything I can think of is just starting one end and just sort of thread it through as we go. I don't know, not easy at all. It'd be nice if there was some lugs or something on here, some sort of alignment lugs, which would have, they could have just made these bigger, for instance, alignment lugs which would have joined it up or something. Got no clue. Anyway, let's have a fiddle. Probably going to take an hour. Now don't get too excited, it's not fitted yet, but I've just noticed that there's obviously holes in this drum where the blades mount there and under there, and as the blades are curved, of course, we've got to figure out the exact rotation of the top half to make sure the holes will align underneath. There's nothing in the instructions about that, of course, because you wouldn't expect there to be, would you? So before you get excited and bolt it together, it might be worth chucking a set of blades in there just to make sure the hole's the right way around. So after a bit of fiddling around, it seems the easiest way, I think, is to put it on this way, and it seems to sit better with that fat lip facing inwards, so I'm assuming that's the way it goes, because of course in the manual it doesn't say anything. Assembled. New motor has turned up, which does actually work mildly better than the other one, which I'll show you in a minute. And we've ironed out the drum issue around there, so that's all good to go. Now it's important to make sure that this is nice and straight, and likewise this side. Let's have a quick look at the motor, and then I'll tell you about the motor over there. Right, so here's the old motor. You'll just see what a load of jobby this is. Right, here we go. I'll try and show you on here. Watch this pulley. See how it wobbles? Well, that wobble is greater than the distance between one of those lines there, grooves, and that's enough to then actually basically act like a spiral and work the belt off. So I don't know if I can fix that or not. I don't know whether that's warped or it's just not mounted straight on the axle. It's a bit annoying because whilst it's cheap, the actual bearing housings are everything fine. They've put a little rubbish piece of plastic on there, and they also mounted it to this very thin plate. There's a new camp I made, so now you can see it sits perfectly straight, so we should be okay. Let's give it a little test. Not bad. Right, let's go fill it with muck. Right, so I've used it for, I don't know, half a day now, and this keeps coming undone. Now it's quite interesting actually, because if we go right around this side, I fell over. Right, the gap there, see, has changed. So I think actually what happens is that you don't need this spacer here, and that does go that side, but this is such a poorly machined up here that this won't actually fit inside that housing very well. But as you use it, the wobbling and that seems to, and the pressure on the screw, on the bolts, seems to force it in slowly. So I'm going to loosen it off and take this back out, and it should be good to go. Now it's actually, like I said, I've been using it half a day. It's actually quite good. Noisy, and it sounds a bit rough and made a bit of a mess of it, but overall I think for 225 quid delivered, a couple of tweaks, not that bad. So you could do a lot worse, I think. Cheaper than buying one of the 110s or 240 bell type ones, which got a lift up on the stand. I quite like this old Vida Saint Pet style one. It's pretty cool. Anyway, there you go. If you want one, there's a link in the description.